Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's WE-DiFine's evidence session titled When Digital Finance Fits Women's Financial Preferences, Evidence from the WE-DiFine Research Portfolio. Thank you for joining us from across the different time zones. Before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. This session will last for an hour. We are recording this session, and after the meeting, we will upload this on YouTube so that it is accessible for all. We will not be taking questions during the presentation or the panel discussion, but feel free to submit your questions through the chat button, and we will address them at the end of the event during our Q&A segment. This event draws on synthesis findings from across the different WE-DiFine research portfolio and centers on one key question: how should digital financial services be designed to genuinely support women's economic empowerment? Across the Across the studies, a consistent pattern emerges, and digital finance works best when it aligns with how women already manage money, especially around liquidity timing, structured cash flows. With that, I'm pleased to invite Elijah Kipchumba to present the synthesis findings. Elijah, over to you.
Thanks for having me. Just a second as I set up my screen. Okay, so can you see the slides, Tasnuba?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, good. So I'll be presenting a summary of a couple of papers that we've received through this WE-DiFine initiative, and to kind of lay some ground, we'll be talking today mostly around how does digital finance empower women, and focusing more on the design features that empower women. So what is WE-DiFine in a nutshell? So WE-DiFine is a research exercise or research initiative that is under BIGD, Bragg Institute of Governance, that seeks to generate evidence on how digital finance empowers women. And the focus here is to kind of tease out the causal mechanism through which digital finance empowers women. And the geographical focus is more around Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so far, it has funded over 25 studies. And today we'll be drawing findings from up to 10 or so working papers that we've received so far. This is the synthesis is going to be a live synthesis in the sense that it's going to be updated often as the findings come in. To kind of lay a summary of where are we in terms of the evidence that we have received so far from these papers. The white paper behind this initiative lays out up to 10 causal mechanisms that we thought could be behind the reasons for how women, how digital finance empower women. And clearly, from the findings that we found so far, is that when digital finance fits into women preferences, it empowers women mostly through behavioral influence. For example, earmarking of finances, whether it's mental accounting, in the sense that we have sub-wallets, by digital finance enabling women to kind of partition their finances into different purposes. That how enables them to enact their preferences within the household. And the second finding is that in terms of privacy, that it's always argued that digital finance empowers women by the fact that it gives them privacy over the information, like kind of keep some of the information about their finances private within the household and outside the household. we find this that we need to rethink the privacy side, and we'll talk deeper into this. And clearly, it's not monolithic in the sense that privacy is different in the household, or privacy needs is different in the household, and privacy needs is uh, different from when it's outside the household. And then the the third component is that the underlying mechanism through which digital finance empowers women is by looking more deeper into digital capabilities. Without the digital capabilities that women go through, or without the digital capabilities that enable women to access the finances through these digital platforms, without the capability, they would not be able to derive mass gain. To kind of flip on the flip side is that we have some gaps that we thought is thinly, we don't have evidence completely. For example, we don't know whether by accessing digital finances, does it mean that women are less discriminated compared to the traditional finance? And at the same time, the fact that access to digital finance helps to address the barriers about mobility, because women have constraints about the mobility. We don't know whether it addresses the mobility by being more mobile, or bridging the geographical distance or the constraints. We don't know whether that empowers women or not. And the other missing side is access to digital non-financial services. That also is still missing from these censuses. So I'll go deeper into some of the findings that we've found. And the first thing that we have is that without digital capabilities, without the digital capabilities, women are not able to derive the benefits from digital finance. And therefore, initiatives that empower women in terms of building their digital capabilities help them to move along the way in terms of utilization of these digital financial services. For example, in a study in Malawi, women were trained on digital finance, and one side they were trained with alongside their husbands, and what they found out is that these digital capabilities kind of remain over time. Like over time, they track the same women for three years, and the capabilities that they gained as a result of the training sticks with them. On the flip side, if women were just given mobile phones just a couple of months, like within 1 year, these phones are either appropriated, or they were lost because the devices got damaged. So hardware-centric approaches do reduce, they don't really empower women. Then if we look at this in terms of women, what exactly are the women
Sorry,
preferences?
Elijah. Elijah, can you hear
Yep,
me? Sorry,
yes.
can you make the presentation full screen because this will make it easier for people to follow. It's right now it's not full screen.
Oh, it's not full screen. Okay. Is it now full screen?
Now it's actually gone. You may need to do it again.
Okay. Sorry for that. Share it again. Just a minute. About now.
It was full screen, but then again, there is this outline. The next slide is on the right side. So I'm not sure. But I mean, if you can't solve it, I think we should continue. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Right now it's full screen. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, so just a minute. So when we talk of women digital preferences in terms of the digital finance, is that on one side, women requires liquidity, like during to kind of smooth consumption, and on the other side, they would wish to kind of partition their finances in which that they can say, okay, a portion of my money is meant for, let's say it's for consumption, a portion of it will be for my savings, but within the same, like having like from a larger pot, you can partition into some segments. The other component is that women would want to have resources in such, or to have the resources in such a way that it is predictable, such that when you have a shock, they know that, or when they incur a shock, they know that the money would come in at that critical time of need. And also, in terms of receiving their money, they would wish to keep their money, even while it is kind of labeled, they would wish to have like a soft commitment in that the money is not kind of not that fungible, in like you can't, they would wish to have some soft commitment of their resources that they cannot just withdraw anytime, that they would wish to have. And if we look at in terms of liquidity, on one side, whatever, and this is drawing from a study by Achyuta in India Good Business Lab, is that when women have structured liquidity, they would have they would have some benefit in terms of being more productive if they are able to manage their liquidity more for their household uh, and their housework. Then they would, sorry, they would become more productive, and but that liquidity does not come at a cost in terms of household savings. On the other side, if they don't have this structured liquidity, uh, it has an effect in terms of the psychological well-being, and there is a lot of stress for these women, and they would resort to informal borrowing. So the study in India, what they found is that by having women access like a portion of their earnings, like earned wage access up to 50%, it increases their productivity at work. And in their household, they are less likely to borrow to kind of smoothen consumption. And that means that by being more productive at work, and they are able to manage the consumption smoothing at home, they become more psychologically well off. On the other side, if we look at their liquidity preferences for women, and this is drawing from willingness to pay experiment for an index insurance in Kenya, women had expressed like strong preference to have payouts at the time that coincided more strongly during periods of the lean season, like when there is lower food available in the house. And then when we look at the second dimension, which is more of looking at the privacy side, uh, in terms of digital finance, women have like two sides of privacy. One is at home, they would wish to have some kind of partial privacy at home where they can share some of their financial information with their spouses. On the other side, they would wish to have like proper privacy of information towards external persons, people outside their household. And this is typified by an experiment in Uganda, whereby the authors, this is like Selim and the team, what they did is that they offered money using both cash, and they varied also the fact that the same money was offered in through mobile money. And what they found out is that but the fact that women receive the money on mobile money, even if their husband knew, they could still maintain the decision making over the same money. So the fact that money arrived on mobile money is already labeled enough for women to retain the finances. But the trade-off comes in that if women have complete privacy of information, it could increase some spousal mistrust and therefore increase things like intimate partner violence. And but when the husband knows about the money that is coming in the house, this kind of mistrust does not occur. And that is the end of my presentation. I would now switch over to the panel discussion, where we would go deeper into these studies. We will draw, like, for example, we have Selim will touch bases on the study in Uganda, and we have Samyukta who will also touch the study in Kenya, and Achyuta who is also touching the study in from India. So to kind of start us off, I would ask like a couple of questions to our panel discussion. They will first introduce themselves in a minute or two, and then they will talk about their study and answer some of these questions that we have. So we'll start off with introducing Selim. Selim is a professor at Trinity College in Dublin, and he is part of the team that did a study in Uganda. So Selim, I would like you to kind of reflect on this question, which is in terms of digital finance design features, based on your study, what do you think were the design features that improved women outcomes? And what lessons do you think that providers can derive from this study?
Thank you so much, Elijah. Yeah, so as Elijah mentioned in this paper, our objective was to understand what is the most effective way in transferring cash transfers to women. As you all know, cash transfers are a very popular and important policy tool in many contexts, and Uganda is one of them. And we wanted to especially compare the effectiveness of providing them digitally using mobile money or providing them in cash as hard money. And in particular, we wanted to also understand, we already know from previous evidence that digital transfers can provide better control to women and improve their economic outcomes. And we wanted to understand whether the relevant mechanism is through privacy of information or something else. And for that, we also varied whether their spouses, their husbands, were also informed about the cash transfers that were going towards their wives. And in the end, our findings suggest that it's there's a bit of a trade-off, and it really depends on which outcome we look at. If we look at general indicators of economic empowerment, such as women's control over the cash and how they utilize the money, whether it's in their own business or in their joint business activities, we find, similar to previous evidence, that digital cash transfers are more effective because they provide better control to women. We see that there's improvement in their decision-making power and also improvement in their income from their individual business activities. On the other hand, we find the cash-based, in particular the joint cash-based transfer, when their spouses are also informed, is more effective in reducing intimate partner violence. So this is the trade-off that our study highlights. And we believe that the main mechanism is through, as Elijah also mentioned, through improving trust in the couple. Like it seems like when the transfer is in cash and also the husbands are informed, this reduces the women's control, but at the same time, it improves the likelihood that there is more communication and more trust amongst the spouses, and that seems to be more effective in reducing intimate partner violence. So in the end, it's like, as I mentioned, it's a trade-off, and it really depends on which outcomes we look at and which outcomes we prioritize. Sorry, Elijah, I think you're on mute. I can see you're saying something, but
Sorry. Thanks, Selim. My second question goes to Achyuta, and the question is, based on your experiment, we know that the liquidity access for women who are in garment factories do shape behavior. How did you think that this liquidity access help them in their how in their workplace and in their home?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Elijah, and to the organizers for putting this panel together. And thanks for funding this work. I've learned a lot from doing work on earned wage access. So just to give you a bit about our project, we tested the impacts of earned wage access or pay advance for women workers in a factory in southern India. And I think the core problem, as I think Elijah mentioned a little bit about before, is that even workers, even people who have, kind of a fairly steady stream of income, um, often face problems of liquidity, especially kind of in the inter periods between paychecks. Um, and those problems of liquidity are intensified when they have shocks to their expenditures. And these shocks are very common. So things like, your child getting sick and having to go to the doctor, or um, you know uh, an elderly relative having to spend some time in the hospital, or having an accident, or even utility bills that are unexpected. So when electricity prices are fluctuating a lot, you might not realize that your utility bill is going to be very high this month, and so that puts a lot of financial stress and mental stress on people who don't have very much reserves and other sources of liquidity. So often when um, people are faced with these big shocks to expenditures, they have to borrow from friends and family, but that often doesn't cut it. That doesn't really kind of get to the amounts that they need. And so they end up borrowing from other sources like money lenders who tend to charge very high interest rates. Um, and that's bad because it potentially perpetuates a cycle of debt and just costs a lot to the household. And the household feels that impact for months and months to come. Um, so we tested a solution for this, which I'm sure you all know about, and it's kind of becoming very prevalent in many countries, which is called earned wage access, or salary advance, or pay advance, which is essentially borrowing from your future self by taking out a part of your earned salary early. So the idea is, if I've worked for 15 days of this month, but I will only get paid on the 30th day of the month, then I've actually earned half of my salary. And so basically, this product allows me to withdraw some or all of that earned salary early so that I can use it for whatever I need to in the middle of the month. And then when my paycheck comes, that much will be automatically deducted from my paycheck, um, and not transferred to me. So essentially, I'm repaying myself in the future. So we tested this idea in a garment factory in India amongst low-income women workers, and we randomized people into access to this tool we designed, which allowed people to withdraw their salary early before their payday, and we found that this had fairly dramatic effects um, on a variety of individual outcomes as well as kind of workplace outcomes. So I think the major impacts on individuals was on their finances and their financial stress. So when women got access to earned wage access, um, they used it a lot. So more than a third of women ended up using the product at least once, and most people who used it once used it multiple times. The average number of uses was about five. Um, and uh, women use this product to withdraw pretty small amounts of salary, so around 4 or 5,000 rupees a month, which which seems small, but it's a fairly sizable chunk of the total monthly budget of these households. Um, so workers, who in the treatment group who got access to EWA, actually, we see that they borrow less from their friends and family. They borrow less from money lenders. And that's a big deal for their finances because it allows them to smooth their consumption, which we can track very carefully through our surveys. And um, we I think in terms of the kind of longer term impacts of this on their finances, we see some impacts as well because moneylender loans are really, really high interest. We actually find that for these short-term loans, the interest rate, if you annualize it, is around 450% for borrowing between 5 and 10,000 rupees. So it's a just a massive, massive rate of interest if you had to pay this back, even after a few months. Um, so we see that in terms of finances, women are better off as a result of having access to this tool. Um, and also, this translates into the kind of workplace because less financial stress generates more room for, kind of being your most productive self at work. And we find that productivity goes up by about 9 or 10%. And all of that is driven by the kind of subset of the sample who is most financially distressed at baseline. Um, and so we find that, for those individuals, impacts are almost 18 to 20% productivity gains. Um, and retention goes up as well. So if you look at the end of our trial period, about a year from the start of when these women got access to the tool, um, retention went up by about 25% in this sample. And that's important not only for the firm, but also for women, because what we find is we track people regardless of whether they're still at the factory, and we found almost everybody. And so basically, um, what we find is that women who left the factory don't end up taking up jobs elsewhere with any speed. So basically, almost no women who have left the factory have another job in about 6 months of follow-up that we do. What that means is that the 25% retention gap means that there is a huge income gap between the treatment and control group. So women in the treatment group are therefore earning about 12% more income than women in the control because more women are sticking around at the factory in the treatment group. Um, yeah, let me stop there and I can take other questions if necessary.
Thanks for that insights. I would just follow it up with it's a bit surprising that this intervention did not affect the savings, like how much the household has accumulated over time. Don't you think, from the hindsight, that if we design a product that is focused more on the savings rather than uh, borrowing from yourself, like would it have the same kind of a thing in terms of productivity and liquidity smoothing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think we in other work that we did in parallel to this stuff that was funded by the Gates Foundation, we actually tried a variety of different employer sponsored savings products. And we it's a slightly different sample and things like that, but we see very similar results on smoothing. And we see a lot of take up of the savings accounts from women. So I think you might be right that we may see similar results in some sense if we, offer savings accounts. The one caveat I'll say, you know, um, is that the orders of magnitude in this the EWA trial of the impacts in this trial are generally much larger than what we see in any savings products, even where we have really high take up. Um, the ability to borrow seems to unlock a lot of kind of smoothing gain that is perhaps hard to build up through savings accounts. And so, yeah, I think the verdict is still out. We may get some of the same results with savings accounts, but the kind of magnitude of impact tends to be larger with EWA.
Thanks for those insights. I would go next with Samyukta, and based on your study in Kenya about the index insurance, why do you think that if we structure financial flows in a way that benefits, in a way that follows women's preferences, it often outperforms access like or hardware kind of approaches in terms of changing women's outcome?
Thank you, Elijah, for that question. And thanks to BIGD for inviting me on this panel. I'm Samyukta. I'm a PhD candidate at Wageningen University. And we conducted this pilot study about crop insurance compensation timing and women's preferences in Kenya. So as part of the pilot, we developed and tested this insurance product that basically provides compensation for losses in installments. So what happens in standard parametric insurance products is that premiums are paid at the beginning of an agricultural season. The index is monitored throughout the season, and payouts are usually completed in a single lump sum transfer at the very end of the season post-harvest. And if anyone has any experience with agricultural insurance, you also know that delays are quite common. But now with the availability of more real-time data from satellites and on-field sensors, it's possible to do loss assessments of agricultural losses much quicker, almost on a real-time basis, but at the very least at the end of different crop growth stages. And so that, in combination with digital financial platforms such as mobile money, allows us to also disburse compensation much earlier than before in installments. And what is interesting about this is that economics theory would kind of lead us to assume that people would want money as early as possible because they discount time heavily, or they face some liquidity constraint during the season, or if they are in need of liquidity to undertake adaptation or recovery from the crop loss that they have suffered. But we wanted to test whether this was really the case. And we also wanted to test whether there was any taste in for an insurance product that provides compensation on a customized basis, so allowing people to choose when they want to receive compensation, the timing, as well as the size of the transfer. So two things really stood out from our findings. One is what Elijah mentioned, which is that women's preferences are quite markedly different to men's on when they want to receive transfers. But it is also notable that about half of the sample that we had did not want to receive transfers as early as possible. Instead, they preferred to lump transfers. They wanted to receive fewer transfers and larger transfers, even if this meant waiting for a longer period of time. And we found that this taste for lumping and waiting for transfers at a particular time was more common among people who scored lower on our economic empowerment metric. So the main takeaway from that was that preferences for when and how to receive incoming transfers is quite heterogeneous in any sample. And this has a lot to do with the level of economic empowerment. The second thing that stood out to us was that there was a significantly higher taste for this customized compensation. People, more than 75%, wanted to have customized compensation timings for their insurance products, and they were willing to pay on average about 10% more for it. And this was highest among the subgroup of women who also scored low on our economic empowerment metric. So women with low economic empowerment valued customized compensation a lot more than anybody else. Having said that, providing this design of insurance is not a silver bullet, because we didn't see any difference in uptake over the single season that we studied, the pilot season. But this uptake did increase significantly, again, in the subgroup of women with low economic empowerment. So I think to answer Elijah's question, we did some exploratory analysis to see why women prefer this product that gives them transfers when they want. A little bit has to do with consumption smoothing. So women tended to ask for transfers at the time that coincided with levels of high food insecurity, whereas we didn't find this in the case of men. And also women who had low agency over transfers, which is what we define by the degree of control they have over different sums of money. So women with low agency tended to prefer customized compensation, and they were also the ones who tended to prefer larger transfer sizes. And this is echoing a lot of literature that we find from cash transfers, where there is a high taste for larger transfers among women. And this has to do with lack of access to finance outside of the intervention. People who find it quite rare to come across these large sums of money tend to prefer large incoming transfers so that they can make kind of more aggregate expenses that they see fit. So we think that it is both pertinent to allow people to choose when they want to receive transfers, as well as the size of transfers, because there seems to be quite a lot of heterogeneity in what people prefer. And this does seem to differ based on gender and based on economic levels of empowerment. But if technology is allowing us to be more flexible with transfer timings, then I think that is the way to go. Thanks.
Thanks, Mukta, for that. It's quite interesting that women's and men's preferences differ, and there's the tendency that, okay, we often know from the literature that women tend to have like more preferences for outcomes that are favorable to the household, and therefore probably that explains why they prefer that to have the transfers closer to the like in the lean season. Now, I would wish to return the mic back to Selim, and based on this rich design that your team had on cash transfers, varying also the levels of observability of information. If we are to go back, if you had the opportunity to go back, what extension would you pursue to this kind of a study?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think knowing now what we know, the findings, as I mentioned before, we find this trade-off, right? And it's very hard for us to judge like which outcome is better. So I think I could go back, I would probably do what Samyukta has also suggested and let people choose which option they prefer. Whether they prefer mobile money, like to receive their cash transfers as mobile money or as actual cash, I would just if I could have another arm where I would allow the participants to decide on their own, I would like that to see what they choose, because otherwise it's very hard for us to monetize and judge which outcome is better from a welfare perspective. So I think allowing them to choose would enable us to say something more concrete about that.
Thanks, Selim, for that. So we are talking here about like moving financial products closer to women's preferences as much as possible. Now, the next question would go to Acute, and uh, you are close to like where we design financial product. The Good Business Lab could be like a kind of a think tank in terms of design of products. Now, with the advancements in terms of, we are thinking of women moving financial products closer to women preference as much as possible. What are the new developments that you are seeing in this space? Like we've talked about the savings, are there like kind of new other things, probably in the AI and stuff like that?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think there are a few interesting directions I think we are that we'd love to take with future work and some of the things we're working on. I think the first is understanding the differences in take up across men and women in this kind of earned wage access product. Earned wage access or pay advance, salary advance products are becoming more and more prevalent all around the world. There's major providers, in basically in most countries. But I think there's two major access barriers that still remain. The first is just sort of income related, um, which is basically that a lot of the tools kind of target white collar workforces. Um, so, they'll go to Fortune 500 companies and things like that for obvious reasons because a lot of these tools are trying to make money and um, you know, they get the most favorable deals of the largest companies. But those companies also tend to be the ones with, higher income workers who uh, still find value in doing pay advance and use it a lot. But we reason that I think we'd find even more value if we extended it to lower income populations. Um, so and indeed, even in our trial, we find that, people who exhibit the most financial stress at baseline are actually the ones who use the app the most. Um, so uh, I think it's tricky to try to get access to lower income worker populations um, from the sort of financial sustainability point of view. And it's not clear that any of these platforms necessarily want to do that. Um, and I think the biggest hurdle is that you need a lot of kind of on the ground coaching and support to actually be able to, enable people to use this product. I think people are very loath or, mistrust or for other various like digital literacy related reasons, they're not going to be downloading an app and entering their information and doing that in a very easy way. Um, but most current providers don't really want to um, exert those massive costs on the ground that it takes to actually enable, access to a lower income population. I think that's no, um, that's not a criticism of those companies. It's more just that's the reality. Um, and so thinking about how we might enable access to lower income populations, I think is a key goal as we think about how to scale this work, given the positive findings of the trial. Um, the other goal here is thinking about differences in usage across men and women. So when we finished the trial, um, the the factory GM was very excited and said, you can't take this product away because it's had an amazing impact in a factory. We want to make it available to everybody. Um, and the workers really felt the same way. There's a lot of interest in keeping this access around, the ability to kind of withdraw your earned wages early. So we actually expanded it to, everybody in the factory, which is about 3 or 4 thousand workers. And we tracked usage as we did this. And what we found was that, outside of the trial setting, which was only women, usage was women started using it and kind of the usage rates were basically in line with what we found in the trial. women who were kind of outside of the trial, but still in the same factory. But men in the same factory basically used it at a much more rapid clip. So men, usage for men was something like 70 or 80% within 6 months of it being available, in the factory. So that's almost double what it was for women. So I think there's potentially additional barriers that women face um, in trying to access EWA, whether it's kind of a feeling of control over finances and whether they have the kind of decision-making power within households um, to be able to withdraw some of their salary early, or it's, additional tech barriers or literacy barriers around using, the service, which we made very easy. We had somebody on the factory floor working with people who wanted to withdraw. So I think it's still unclear to me, why we see these huge differences in men and women's usage. Um, but it definitely indicates to me that there's additional barriers to women using the app that we need to, think through and alleviate if we want to make this kind of truly accessible to women.
Thanks for those observations. The last reflection, I would like to hand it over to Samyukta. And this is based on kind of anecdotal evidence around uptake of index insurance, especially in Kenya. It's quite low, like insurance uptake is quite low. Now, your study shows that there are two sides of the preferences. One is women prefer a portion of their payouts to be done like immediately. And then the second biggest chunk is to be paid out in during the lean season. Now, in terms of designing um, index insurance or digital financial products in general, how do we prioritize these two and balance between these two items?
So just to answer with respect to insurance, because it's the space I know best. I think, as I pointed out before, I think excessive rigidity in how financial contracts are structured has really hurt the case for insurance. And it has come at the expense of mistiming payments, both premium collection as well as payout disbursement, to people's actual liquidity needs, which especially in rural households and agricultural households, we know wildly fluctuates based on harvest timings, based on the crops that they're growing, and based on weather shocks. But the second important thing that rigidity does, not only does it make it harder for people to ensure that their payments match their own liquidity needs, it also makes it harder for insurance providers. Insurance providers spend a lot of time, money, and energy trying to hit people at the right time. They spend a lot of time exploring, when exactly farmers are going to sow, and when exactly they harvest, so that they can hit them at the right time to collect premiums. And often because of unpredictable weather, these things are changing. And so a lot of time is invested. And if they don't reach farmers at the right time, often then they don't end up selling the insurance product. A little bit of decoupling from that and making both premium payments as well as compensation receipts flexible would reduce the burden both on the farmer as well as on insurance providers. And now that with mobile money, with the ability to send reminders remotely, with the ability to interact with farmers through phones, I think it should be possible to, not have to make that trade-off on timing exactly to people's preferences. I think we have the ability to allow people to make their decisions. Commitment, I have another study in which we allow premium payments to also be flexible. So people contribute premium amounts when they have high liquidity. But we do find that commitment is an issue there. People need to be reminded There needs to be some sort of local network that encourages commitment. But if we can resolve those issues, then I think technology provides a good way for us to make financial contracts more flexible. And that's where I see the future for insurance also lying.
Thank you, Samyukta, and the entire panel. This has been quite insightful. Now, would move this discussion forward by throwing it back to Tasnuba and to kind of we pick questions from our audience.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Elijah, and thank you to our panelists for the discussion. We'll now move into the open Q&A portion of the session. Please continue to send your questions through the chat. This segment will be facilitated by Imran Jamal, our research fellow for the WeConnect and WEE-DiFine initiatives. Imran Bhai, over to you.
Hello, thank you for a rich discussion to our panelists. We already have a couple of questions which I've got down. The first question was put forward when you were doing the presentation, Elijah. It is, what type of trainings were given? Did it include financial management training? So I guess there's a interest to know what exactly, which type of trainings worked and what is being put forward. If I could put that question to you, Elijah, and anyone else in the panel who'd like to answer.
So I think this refers to the study in Malawi, and the training focused on two dimensions. One is how to use the devices, because the devices were being distributed. So how to navigate the smartphone that was being given. And then the second bit was about mobile money, how to use mobile money within the phone. So generic phone and mobile money.
Thank you. But then the question included if there was any financial management training provided.
No.
So that's not part of the remit. Thank you. Did any of the studies that the panelists were involved with, did you provide any financial management training, or was that something that was not part of the intervention?
It was not part of our intervention in Uganda.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to add, we didn't actually do any financial training, but I do think, the results I just highlighted on men versus women and differential take-up, and the, fact that we had to design a very specific kind of product that had a lot of hand-holding and ability to, ask questions and things like that, reinforces the idea that perhaps digital literacy training, an effective version of digital literacy training might actually be useful for the earned wage access context.
Just to chime in from our study, insurance is quite a highly misunderstood financial product. So we always do training about insurance in advance, so using multimedia tools and like a little written brochure, a graphic. But it does speak a little bit to our results that we don't often find any impacts on take-up over one season of implementation, because a lot of the learning with insurance is actually experiential, which also makes it challenging to kind of study insurance itself, because people typically, they want to be signed up for it and then experience payouts, and only then they know that the product works. So the training is absolutely necessary, but also experience.
Thank you for your answers. The next question we have is, in settings where many women rely on agents and have limited digital skills, how can digital finance prevent new forms of dependency while genuinely strengthening women's control over their income? I think this was particularly aimed at Ayu, because this came up during your answers.
Yeah, maybe I can start on that. I think this is a very important point. Certainly, we know in many contexts, like I know more about the Bangladesh context, this is definitely a challenge. And I know there are projects currently on the field that are being implemented to better understand this. But certainly, yeah, when digital finance is mainly implemented through agents, and especially given gender norms and gender disparities in who is the agent and who is the user or intended user, this can be a challenge. And I don't really have a clear answer, but I know very well that there are policies and interventions that are currently being designed to address this challenge. But otherwise, yeah, I think in order to unleash the full potential of digital finance, we need to better understand this. In our context in Uganda, this was not as much a challenge for us because mobile money, at least in Uganda, is quite widely spread, and it's pretty well used and adopted. So I don't think in that sense, like the way it works is not so agent oriented, and we actually in our study we assessed whether distance to the agent, for example, was an important dimension, and we don't really find much that it had a significant effect on our results. So overall, like at least in our context, we didn't feel like it was a key challenge. Thank
Yeah,
Thank
and I think it's a good point, and I think this is where I think Elijah mentioned earlier, AI might play an increasingly, more interesting role, replacing kind of in-person agents, but still offering help and support, to get people enrolled and to, help people make transactions, etc. Um, and since we're talking about digital, interactions anyway, I think AI, this is a space where this could be very influential. Um, so yeah, I look forward to seeing, what's possible there.
Thank you for your responses. Do we have any other questions from anyone else who's present, who'd like to add anything? There is a comment in the chat which talks about additional barriers certainly are a big problem. The elephant in the room, access, yes, but we have to look at environmental factors, which I think is something all of the panelists you've talked about in your own context quite a bit. But is there anything you'd like to add about with regards to this point? Or do you feel like you've said sufficiently what you have to say?
I think we can certainly discuss this more. Unfortunately, I have to run to another appointment, but yes, I think this is a very fruitful avenue for discussion for sure.
I
Thank
agree.
you very much. Right.
I should.
Okay, in that case, I guess if no one has any more comments or questions, as we said, we'd be done in an hour, just over an hour. I'd like to thank all the panelists once again, Salim, Samyukta, and Elijah, especially for doing the synthesis paper and bringing together all of this knowledge and being the reason for us for having this conversation, which was very fruitful and very enlightening. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who's participated.